I'll get started. I'm Rosa. I'm from the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation, and thank you for responding so promptly to my request to behave appropriately. Girls in the front row. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about some key findings from the Victorian gambling study. Some of them will be about online, and I've been put into the regulation stream, but it is basically about key findings from the Victorian gambling study. I'll preface it by saying I'm not an epidemiologist and I'm not a statistician, but we have epidemiologists and statisticians on the team working on this longitudinal study. So this is the result. These are the results from a group of people who've worked on this. Okay, presentation overview. I'll just give a very brief background to the Victorian gambling study. I'll talk about some very briefly about some key findings, incidents, transitions, predictions, and a little bit about internet gambling. Okay, the Victorian gambling study is a longitudinal study. We had a series of 13, I think from memory, objectives. We had a series of 3 objectives and 11 hypotheses. We wanted to look at the risk and vulnerabilities related to changes in gambling status. We wanted to get a first-year incidence of problem gambling, and we were really interested in the transitions, the movements over the years, how people wax and wane in and out of problem gambling, or if they did. Okay, the Victorian gambling study has got 3 designs. The first is a cross-sectional general population study. So we had 15,000 people who were contacted by CATI, computer-assisted telephone interview. We oversampled in LGAs, local government areas, that had high expenditure on EGMs. 70% of our 70% were from LGAs with high EGM expenditure, 20 from medium EGM expenditure bands, and 10 from low EGM expenditure bands. We hypothesised that we'd get more problem gamblers in the areas where there were lots of poker machines, and then we weighted it back. All of wave 1 was weighted. The cross-sectional general population study was weighted. Waves 2, 3 and 4 were not weighted, except for wave 2 incidents, which we could because it was a general, we're looking at the general population. As I mentioned, the second, third and fourth waves were longitudinal, and we had a qualitative component in between. Anyone who was a problem gambler in wave 1 or wave 2 or wave 3 was and agreed to be followed up in interview, we interviewed. Okay, and that was qualitative, face-to-face, one-on-one. So I'm going through the first slides in the background a bit faster because we're a bit behind time. Okay, the types of questions that can be broadly categorised as gambling participation in those 12 activities. We screened using the PGSI, and we also did a lifetime risk of gambling using the NODS Clip 2 scale. In our study, anyone who gambled once in the past year was classified as a gambler and was administered the PGSI, and that included gambling on raffles, sweeps, etc. We also asked questions on gambling on stocks, day trading. Yeah, had a blank. Okay, we had a number of health and wellbeing questions. There were core questions in waves 1, 2, 3, 4, and these were the K10, the readiness to change, life events, recreation, smoking using the cage, and self-reported health. In various waves, we added other questions. So in wave 2, we asked questions about the global financial crisis and the economic stimulus package under Kevin Rudd. We had the big bushfires in wave 2. We were interested to see what would happen in terms of gambling with the bushfires. So we asked questions. We asked different questions, specific questions in wave 3 and wave 4 similarly, and we reintroduced the trauma and hardship question in wave 4 after our qualitative interviews where so many of them reported such trauma and such hardship in their lives. So we reintroduced it, and we haven't analysed that yet. Okay, these are roughly the times that we went out and recruited. In wave 3, we did ask additional questions related to sporting events because that was smack bang. We've been asking going out during the Melbourne Cup season, during the racing carnival, so we thought we'd ask questions about the racing carnival, and unbeknownst to us, about 5% of non-gamblers gambled during the spring racing carnival, and that was something that we didn't expect, and they classified themselves as non-gamblers. But, you know, a month of racing and the spring carnival, hey, you know, that's not gambling. So they're roughly the times. Okay, how much have I got? Okay, 11 minutes. This gives you a structure, a diagram of what we did. We had 15,000 in the cross-sectional at the very top, that was the wave 1. When we designed the cross-sectional survey, we designed it so that it could be a follow-up, we could do longitudinal, even though we didn't have funding at that stage and no guarantee we could go further, we did design it that way. So approximately half, 7,148, agreed to participate, so they became our cohort that we followed through. In wave 3, we recontacted those people in wave 1 who didn't agree to participate, and if they were soft refusals, ethics gave us permission to recontact them. And so we ended up with 5,620 in wave 3. We capped it in wave 4 because of budgetary constraints. So there are our numbers. And just some key findings. Incidents. We had the Victorian prevalence rate still is, we haven't resurveyed yet, it was 0.7%, and we found that our incidence rate was roughly half of the prevalence rate. And when we looked at the new versus the new old problem gamblers, we found that a third were new problem gamblers in wave 2. That is, they didn't indicate in the NODS clip, which is a measure of lifetime gambling, that they had had a past history of problem or pathological gambling. And we found that 2/3 did have a history according to the NODS clip. We know that, you know, there's a recollection error, you know, recall error. You may not recall that you've had a problem in the past using the NODS clip, but it gives us some indication at least. So 2/3 were pathological and problem gamblers who weren't active or weren't problem gamblers in wave 1, but relapsed, for want of a better term, in wave 2. That's a very pretty diagram showing incidence. The blue is the prevalence. The incidents are the two slabs of the pie that come out. One are the wave 1 problem gamblers who were not wave 2 problem gamblers. That's a 0.36%, the third that I was talking about. So some who remained and some who were new. Okay, now this graph really talks or describes the stability of gambling risk for lifetime gamblers. So at the bottom, there's no pointer, at the bottom you'll see ZR, that's zero risk, low risk, moderate risk, problem gambling. Zero risk, we've just combined the two categories because they're big and we can't fit them all on the page, on the graph, and they score the same. So they're the zero risk. So you'll see that, in other words, the zero risk are the non-problem gamblers and the non-gamblers. So we've combined them for this graph. Along the bottom you'll see lifetime non-problem gamblers, lifetime at risk, lifetime problem and pathological. They are the NODS clip categories. They're the categories after they've completed the NODS clip. So you'll see that the bulk of the zero risk gamblers in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 were scored as lifetime non-problem gamblers on the NODS clip. And you'll go across the graph that way and you'll see the lifetime problem pathological gamblers according to, as they were classified by the NODS clip 2, you'll see about a third, the red, about a third in waves 1, 2, 3, 4 scored as problem gamblers. So that just talks about the stability of the risk status for lifetime problem gamblers. I hope that's clear. Okay, frequency of EGM use. Once again, this uses the NODS clip 2. So and it talks about, goes from wave 1 to wave 3 only. So you'll look at the blue and the pale pink, the salmon colour. So the low lifetime risk, according to the NODS clip 2, are the pale blue, and the high lifetime risk, according to the NODS clip 2, are the salmon colour. Across the bottom, you've got frequency of EGM play. So you've got not at all, less than once per month, 1 to 3 times per month, weekly or more, and up the left-hand scale, you've got 0, 5, 10, 15, that's your CP or PGSI score. So what this graph shows us is that, if you like, I've got 2 arrows, they're not perfect, I just drew them in. Okay, you'll see that the top arrow sort of is for the pink, if you like, the salmon-coloured high lifetime risk users. That basically shows that it's a dose response to frequency, if you like. So the more frequently you gamble on EGMs over the 3 waves, the more likely you are to increase your PGSI score. This is in the same population of people. So it's sort of intuitive because people work with problem gamblers and know that frequency is an issue, but this actually shows a dose response, a monotonic increase. And similarly, for the low lifetime risk problem gamblers, there's still an increase, but it's not as marked. We did do this for table games and for wagering. Table games, we didn't have enough. The cells were too small to be able to do any of the analysis. And for wagering, it wasn't a dose response. There appeared to be a threshold, a step. So it went like that. Okay, it seemed to be that you could gamble a certain amount and you were okay. Your PGSI didn't appear to increase. And then if you gambled more than a certain amount, it increased, it shifted up. So it was like a threshold, whereas this is a dose response for EGMs. Okay, transitions. We did some work on transitions. This is just a diagram to show you that if you're a non-gambler in wave 1, where you could end up in wave 2, and then if you were a non-gambler in wave 1, a problem gambler in wave 2, where you could end up in wave 3, and then where you could end up in wave 4. So you can see there are a lot of transitions, right? And that's just sort of a pictorial view. Okay, transitions. So this one here, this graph here, okay, once again we've got 0 risk, low risk, moderate risk, problem gamblers. If you look at the bottom bar, the bottom red bar, 2011, that's the problem gamblers we had in wave 4. That's 100% of our problem gamblers and where they came from. So you can see that, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, about just under 80% of them were problem gamblers in wave 3, and a few less in wave 4, and a few less in the first wave. So that just shows the transitions as a group. Okay? I'll give you a few minutes to look at that. And that's the other way around. So this is wave 1 risk groups through, misspelt, through waves 2, 3 and 4. So we'll take the problem gamblers again, the thick bar in 2008, that's our problem gamblers in 2008, and that's where they moved, where they transitioned to as a group across the 4 waves. And we've done the same with moderate risk, low risk and the 0 risk. So it just gives you a nice flow, a picture of where they came from. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about person time and what is person time. So person time is the time at risk for all persons in a population. And so each year that a participant contributes to a study is 1 person year. And in our study, we're only using those participants who completed all 4 waves. So we've only at the moment using 3686 in this one. We have 14,744 person years. There's an assumption there that for each wave of the study, participants are new participants. Okay, here are some predictions over a 12-month period. Now, okay, based on our study, and is there a pointer? No. Okay, based on our study, I'll describe it first of all. On one side, you've got the PGSI categories at origin, and across the top, you've got the PGSI categories at destination, where they ended up. Okay, so that's origin, the destination. So you'll notice, if we look at the problem gamblers, across here we've got problem gamblers, and we follow them across. About 71%, the 70 in total is the N in blue, about 71% of our problem gamblers, based on our study, about 71%, they have a 71% chance that if they start as a problem gambler in a 12-month period, they'll end up as a problem gambler at the end of that 12-month period. So this is predictive analysis. You could look at perhaps the moderate risk or the low risk. We'll just take the, which one? We'll take the moderate risk. There's about 47% chance. So if you go across with moderate risk, the two moderate risk columns, it's about a 47% chance, 47.5% chance that a moderate risk gambler at the start of a 12-month period will remain a moderate risk gambler at the end of the 12-month period. And so you can work that out through looking at it. It takes a bit, but 11:23, okay. Okay, I have to go through this quickly. Okay, this graph here talks about the stability of the PGSI categories. It talks about the categories as a whole. So in our study, I've circled 3 there. So 14,744 is the person years, and I've circled 82 and 59. So in our study, participants who were ever a problem gambler in the 4-year period spent 60% of their time roughly in the problem gambling period. So does that make sense? So those who were ever a problem gambler in our 4 years, of the 4 years of our study, spend 60% of their time being a problem gambler during the 4 years. So it applies to our study. So non-problem gamblers, if you were a non-problem gambler, you spent 82% of your time being a non-problem gambler over the 4 years. Okay, so a little bit about internet gambling, because this is meant to be about mobile gambling in the digital era. So using the epidemiology, the first wave, we had 4.8% of Victorian adults who'd participated in some form of gambling, internet gambling, sorry, and 1.8, just under 2%, had participated in gambling activities associated with higher risks, such as EGMs, table games, keno, wagering or sports betting. Okay, so this one here, based on our 3,686 who completed all 4 waves, this graph shows that internet gambling is increasing over time. So we've got wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2008 was when, around the time the iPhones were first introduced. Someone may know better than me, but I think it was around 2007, 2008. So that just shows that over time, internet gambling increased. Okay, participation in internet gambling by activity. So this is our 15,000 going back to wave 1, and it's weighted. That's the participation we had in wave 1. Okay, so now we're looking at problem gambling in the internet, wave 1. So you've got to remember that there's small online gambles, there's a small sample only of online gamblers, so this data is indicative only. Okay, so you'll see that low risk and moderate risk gamblers, the 15.5 and the 7.3, are higher than in the non-line gambler sample. So this is just indicative. This one's wave 4, the same information. So this one here, Once again, it's a small sample, so the data is indicative only. Same sort of thing. Online gambler 14.1, moderate risk 7.3, so they're a bit higher. And have I made it by 11? Yep. And this one here, I'd just like to acknowledge the panel. We had expert advisors, Max Abbott, Sarah Hare, Damien Jolie, Penny Marshall, Jan McMillan, Elma Villanueva, Rachel Volberg and Rosa, me, Chris who's over there and Paul Marden, and we'd like to remember Damien, who unfortunately died. So I'll leave it at that. Is our moderator here?
No, he's not, but I'm the next speaker. I'm happy to juggle your questions while I set up my group.
Okay, well, if you want to set yours up, I'll ask my...
I'm setting one up around the front here, so
oh,
you
okay.
say, by the speaker. Questions for the speaker?
Hopefully not. I hope it was clear. I rushed through it. Oh, Jim.
Sorry, is the data saying then that if they have an internet gamble, they're at higher risk?
No, it's indicative only. We can't say that. We had such a small sample in 91. That's why I said it's indicative. It went up. As you saw, usage went up each time. And if you notice that the moderate and low risk in the online and higher than the non-online sample, but we can't say anything about it.
There's a hint that they're playing on the internet or perhaps the mobile phone, perhaps they're getting worse mischief than if they were just doing the point again. Fair enough, it's low proportions and low proportions. It's hard to just keep numbers for that.
Yeah. So hopefully we're doing the second study. Hopefully we can field with the second epidemiological study. Hopefully we can field in a month or so, and we'll know a little bit more then. And that's why I mentioned the iPhones, because I don't know if that actually relates to all the increases in interest in online gambling.
It's not that, but just looking at those numbers, it's not a total load given
No.
that we could be using those devices.
We actually followed the same population over 4 years and we didn't see a tidal wave of online gambling. So
it's technically possible, but that doesn't mean it's the same thing.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Although I think there was 10% of the Victorian population participating in some form in 2011. Just with the pace of increase, I mean, it's just merely in the last 3 years, the number of people wanting their pocket in their hand. Speculation, but still.
Have you had a chance to look at the rates in comparison to the Canadian market?
No.
I'm just wondering, because I don't know off the top of my head.
The Quinty, that was talking about, I long to look at it.
Because they had the Quinty plus the Alberta one.
The Alberta one, and there's also the Swedish one.
Yes,
And we do.
So I'm just wondering how consistent all of these numbers are.
When speaking about internet gambling, we had higher rates of internet gambling already in 2008. I mean, so the clear connection between internet gambling and problems. So we could really confirm your response to that.
We have to do a bit more analysis. The way we asked that question was, we asked by channel. So we asked each specific activity. So did you bet on horses? Did you do it by telephone, online, computer? We asked by channel. We didn't put all those together. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, because always down to apples and apples, so break down questions because the issue is actually the game is actually game online as opposed to with mobile technology making it easy for people to put their lotto and online.
Yeah.
So I think it's really that accessibility issue, exposure that issue.
That's why we did lotto. And how did you play the lotto, the channel? We did that for all the activities going
smoke, cigarettes, whatever. Okay.
Thank you.